Good day everyone, we are the group 8 and our topic is exposure. Let's start this one with the objectives. At the end of the chapter, the student should be able to describe the various terminologies related to the film exposure and apply the methods and procedures of the film exposures. Perform film exposures preparation. Identify and evaluate various factors affecting exposures of film. Manipulate combinations of intensity of light, lens, aperture, and shutter speed for proper exposure of the film. Demonstrate the simple exposure methods in crime scene photography. Perform actual crime scene photography. Definition of terms. Exposure is making a photographic record by exposing sensitive material to light, action. The quantity of light allowed to act is expressed in terms of the length of time the action is allowed to continue with effective lens aperture use. Ang exposure daw ay nagbibigay ng exposure sa isang material or sa isang tao, katulad sa mga film. Mas madali kang sa camera, mas madaming light, mas mabibigyan mo ng exposure ang iyong actors or yung bagay na gusto mong pagalawin. Filters. A sheet of colored material that is placed before the camera lens which absorb certain colors and allows other to pass through. Ang filters daw yung makapagpaganda ng yung sheet of paper na nasa lens ng ating camera, nasa loob ng camera, na nakakapagbigay ng iba't ibang kulay sa isang bagay. Light meters. Measure light quickly, accurately, and conveniently in any photographic situation and help to determine the appropriate aperture of shutter speed combination. Ang light meters daw po yung mga magme-measure ng light ng pangmabilisan sa inyong camera. The F or the stop system is a relationship between the diameter of the lens opening, the aperture of and the focal length of the lens. The F indicates the speed of the lens or the amount of the light lens let through in proportion of focal length. The F or the stop system is ito po yung kung gaano kahaba yung mga captured mo sa isang scene, sa isang film.
Hey everyone, my name is Jacob Fortuna from BSCRIM223 and these are the report of Group 8. Subject distance. Subject distance is the distance from the camera to the subject. So, yun na nga po. Ito po ang layo ng camera sa isang paksa, ang subject distance. Focal distance. Ang focal distance po, distance of any object upon which the lens is focused. So, ito rin po yung distansya ng isang bagay, ng anumang bagay na kung saan makakatuon ang lens. So, sa focal plane, the plane in which sharp focus lies, focus plane for any lens are many depending upon the distance of the object focused upon. It's usually regarded as the surface of the plane of plates. So, pag sinabing focal plane, dito naman malagi ang sharp o matalim na pagtugon. Ang focal plane ay para sa anumang lens ng anumang lens ay marami. Depende lang sa distansya ng isang bagay na kukuhanan o patutuunan. So, pag sinabing focal length, distance from the optical center of the lens to its focal point. Strictly, focal length is assumed to be the distance between the ground glass or film and the lens aperture when the lens is focused at infinite distance. So, pag sinabing focal length, so kinakailangan po ditong i-assume ang distansya ng ground glass or film at ang lens aperture para mag-focus ng infinite distance. So, next, depth of field Depth of field, the distance from the closest clear object in the photograph to the farther clear object. The nearest and farthest distance apparently in sharp focus on the given object being the photograph. So sa depth of field naman, tinutukoy dito ang distansya sa pagitan ng pinakamalayo na mga bagay na nagbibigay ng imaheng hinuhusgahan na nakatuon sa isang camera. So yun po yung depth of field. So next, intensity of light. The strength of quality of light where it reaches the subject from the light source. So sinasabi dito sa intensity of light ay ito yung panel na sensitibo sa na ilaw na ito ay naglalaman ng mga sensor na nakakabit sa ilaw upang sukatin ito. So next, sa blur. Next is blur. Is the lack of distinction in the different definition caused by the having a multiplicity of image caused by the movement of the camera or subject or its tripod work vibration during exposure. It is also called the sometimes by lack of critical focus. So pag sinabing blurred, so hindi malinaw o hindi gaanong naiiba. So yun po yung pag-blur. Definition. The fidelity with which a lens forms an image of fine details such as sharp, clear-cut with definite lines and area of boundaries. So pag sinabing definition po, dito mabubuo yung malinis o detalyado na kuha. Sa isang imahe, meron itong tiyak na sukat at linya na may hangganan. So yun po yung definition. Distortion refers to an image in which individuals' proportion do not correspond to the proportion of the original. For example, a straight line reproduced as a curved line. So yun naman po, no? Sa distortion naman, sinasabi dito sa isang imahe kung saan sa bawat isang sukat ay hindi tumutugma sa original. Gaya ng example dito, sa straight line ay magiging curve. So yun po yun. Yung straight line magiging curve siya. Yun po yung distortion. Okay, next. Overexposure refers to a film exposure which to great light action resulting from a long period of exposure with too large lens opening. So overexposure, tinutukoy dito ay sobrang pagkakalantad na nagre-resulta na sobrang igo ng pelikula o isang film. Okay, next. Underexposure refers to insufficient light action during exposure to high shutter speed to small lens aperture or the combination of the factors. So underexposure, dito naman ay hindi sobrang pagkakalantad o madilim ang pagkakakuha sa isang imahe o film. Okay. The concept of exposure, we compose films to light so that the image of the object or subject will be recorded in the sensitized materials through the manipulation of lens apertures and shutter speed. Exposure determines how much lights gets to the film. The amount of lights allowed to get inside the camera to reach the sensitized materials film is controlled by the lens aperture and the shutter speed. The combination of two is necessary to capture the proper quality of lights. Certain accessories and specialized photography may be utilized to improve exposure to include filter and devices. as extension tubes use the macro photography, the amount of light is allowed to reach the sensitized materials in a significant and producing good quality image in the production. So sa isa pong fotografiya o isang photographer, kinakailangan din daw po dito ng filters tsaka mga devices upang filter ng mga devices upang gumanda ang kuha natin sa isang image o pagtutuunan natin ng pansin. Kailangan po ng may malinaw, ganun po. Malinaw ang pagkakakuha para ma-detalyado po. Next, when the amount of light needed to capture the image is too great, exposure time was too long, and too large lens aperture, the resultant would be overexposure. When it is vice versa, it is said to be underexposure. Combining control of intensity of light and time, the aperture and shutter speed work together to provide the film with the accurate amount of light with shutter speed and aperture the photographer chooses depend upon. So pag sinabing combining control of intensity of light and time, sinasabi dito na ang aperture at ang bilis ng shutter ay magtutulungan upang mabigay o maipakita ng ayos ang isang film at tumpak na halaga ng ilaw para mailahad dito ng ayos. So yun po yung combining control of intensity of light and time. Kabilang dito ang dalawang uri nito. Number 1, the amount of available light. So yun na nga po, kailangan dito ng available lights. Ito yung dami ng paggamit ng ilaw. So yun po yun. Number 2, ang pangalawa namang uri ay the depth of field required by the subject matter of the photograph. So sinasabi dito, ito naman ay ang lalim ng patlang na kailangan ng paksa ng fotografiya. So yung po yung aking report. Salamat po sa mga nakinig. Thank you. God bless all.
Good day everyone. My name is Lance Owen A. Montalvo from BSCRIM223. At ano nga ba ang shutter? Pag daw ang photographer ay nagamit ng isang film na nagre-react ng dahan-dahan pakanan, dapat ang aperture o siwang ay dapat malaki at ang kanyang exposure ay mahaba. Dapat din alam ng isang photographer ang tamang bilis, galaw, paggamit ng ang film at dapat ay pamilyar sila sa properties ng film in a relation of various light para pag nakuha ng litrato ang isang photographer, maganda ang kakalabasan. Sa pagkuha ng larawan, ang photographer ay kayang hatiin ang intensity ng ilaw sa 5 kategory. Ito ay bright sunlight o maliwanag na sikat ng araw, hazy sunlight o medyo maulap na sikat ng araw, cloudy bright o maulap na maliwanag, cloudy dull, cloudy dark o maulap na madilim. To summarize all this following, ang photographer ay dapat laging tanda o ipasok sa isipan ng ang 6 na factors sa affecting sa process ng film exposure. Ito ay ang mga sumusunod: ASA, ISO, BIN, JSA rating. The most recent being the ISO system used to describe the relationship between exposure and output. Lightning condition include the ground evolution, latitude, prevailing wind currents, and proximity to warm and cold lens opening, aperture, a hole or an opening through which light travels, shutter speed, the length of time the camera shutter is open, exposure light into the camera sensor, color of the subject, kulay ng subject, filter, accessories consisting of an optical filter that can be installed into optical fan. Yun lang po. Thank you.
Stand erect with feet apart at normal distance. Grasp the camera firmly at the side with your right hand. And place it on the top left palm with your right hand, still holding it except for the point finger, which is set ready to press the shutter release button. Curl your other left 3 fingers to make a grip of the camera, while the point and thumb fingers are free and extended to rotate the focusing ring. Clip both your elbows beside your body. Check that no finger is covering the viewfinder and the optical lens. Focus the lens. Forward the film, advance lever with right thumb, hold your breath, and press the shutter release button with the right point finger.